Uncut and on the fly. This past summer, Chris Lee Moore, known as Rowdy C of Rowdy's Reviews, aka TV Trash, which you can find, believe it or not, on OneDrive on Google, or you can find on Vimeo, Vimeo.com. That's Vimeo.com. Now, this past summer, he did a 80s theme where he reviewed classic 80s cartoons from that time period in which he and even I grew up on. And basically, he touched upon a few series that I knew about, I grew up on, as well as some TV primetime specials. But before this, he also touched upon something else that kind of got its start in the 80s. Not its official start, but basically its foundation set then, and that was the Disney Afternoon and shows that were a part of it. One of the shows was probably the most popular out of them all, that being Rescue Rangers. Now, the reason I bring this up is because there's reports going around that the Rescue Rangers are supposed to get a movie. But it's going to be sort of a meta-like environment with us self-aware of the situation, it's comedic, based on the series, whatever. We also know that the Rescue Rangers are returning to television in the third season of the 2017 to now current reboot of DuckTales. But why do I bring the Rescue Rangers up? Well, everybody would consider 1988 as being the year they debuted, and they did, on the Disney Channel. But this was at a time when Disney Channel was still looked at as a premium service. They wouldn't make their official debut worldwide and internationally until the following year in 1989, which marks this year and this time period, this month, as the 30th anniversary of Rescue Rangers. And the reason I bring them up is because, believe it or not, before the reported and talked about live-action CGI movie that they got in the works currently, and whenever it's scheduled to debut, there was talks of the Rescue Rangers getting a movie on the big screen before this. How? Well, quite simple. They were supposed to be the second animated film based on a Disney Afternoon property after Treasure of the Lost Lamp, which was the 1990 DuckTales feature film. Now, unfortunately, DuckTales didn't do so well in the box office. This caused any future DuckTales spin-offs to be shelved indefinitely, and any other future Disney Afternoon-inspired feature films to be either altered or shelved as well. And when I'm talking about altered, let's face it, let's be honest, the 1995 Goofy movie is nothing more than Goof Troop the movie. They just had to change some things around. But when it comes to Rescue Rangers, yes, a movie was planned. But what was the movie going to be about? Or basically, how was the movie going to be looked at? We know that when DuckTales Treasure of the Lost Lamp came out, it served as a bridge between the third season and its final season. Because in its final season, we did see characters from the movie, except for the genie and Murloc, who essentially, spoiler here, dies in the movie via classic Disney villain death. So now that brings us to Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. Would it done the same thing and served as a sequel or a continuation, I should say, to the series, so that the series would continue on with newer episodes in 1991? And believe it or not, it did have some episodes premiere in 91. You can even check out the copyright rights at the end credits to see that. Or would it have served as a finale? See, these are good questions that need to be answered. In my personal opinion, I think it could have gone either way. But since they had all reached the 65 episode limit by the time the movie was being planned, there's a good chance the movie would have served as a finale. Sort of the same way Goofy movie served in 1995 as a finale to Goof Troop. Rescue Rangers would have served the same way around its scheduled time, in my opinion. Unless they did have newer episodes planned, but because of the failure, again, of Treasure of the Lost Lamp that never came to be, then it would have served as a continuation. But my opinion, my humble opinion, just the way it was set up, I think it was going to serve more as a finale. But let's say, excuse me there, got my words mixed up, but so let's say it does serve as a finale, or was meant to serve as a finale. How would it be how would it be done? Or basically, what would be addressed? What would be given finality, if you will? What would be given the thumbs up to make happen, knowing that the movie was going to serve as the series finale? Well, I have my own speculation. Some may or may not agree with it, but I think it's worth noting. One of the things I think that would serve as a finale, and I think would be a great finale, is the acknowledgement finally of how a lot of these mysterious crimes were being solved. How the police were getting this mysterious help from out of nowhere. And by doing so, you could have the Rescue Rangers somehow get the recognition they deserve by probably coming up with the idea to reveal themselves to the world that, hey, here we are, we're the ones that have been doing it. And by doing so, they'd probably have Gadget invent some kind of invention that would allow them to somehow translate what they're saying to the humans so they can understand. I think, honestly, them being acknowledged, them revealing themselves would be a good stepping stone, especially if it's going to wrap up the series. Because that way, you would have the humans of the city and any other parts of the world that were wondering how these crimes were being solved and stuff, realizing, oh my gosh, or coming to the realization like, oh my gosh, we've been saved on multiple occasions. Our crimes and mysteries have been solved on multiple occasions by a group of rodents. How is that possible? Now, you could use the revelation as the main plot of the story, where basically maybe you'd have scientists wanting to come after them to try to see what makes them tick. Maybe you'd have Nimno get released out of the fact that the police finally believe that what he's been saying all the time has been true. You could go in those routes. Or you can go the route where they realize, or where they accept, I should say, that being the humans, accept the fact that, okay, this is pretty awesome, this is pretty interesting. We do admit that there are moments and crimes and stuff that we can't solve that, perhaps, characters like the Rescue Rangers could. And by having this acceptance of this group of heroes, doing what they have done for them under their nose, they could also come to the realization that there are criminals that only the Rescue Rangers can deal with, because some of the criminals are actually animals themselves. So again, they could go either way with a revelation of the Rescue Rangers being revealed as the ones that have always saved the day without some of the humans in the city and parts of the world knowing it. But then there's a question a lot of people have had, even when the series was on, and they've had it to this day. See, one of the plots, or one of the running gags, or running subplots, or whatever you want to call it, is Chip and Dale vying for the affection of Gadget, and Gadget at times kind of returning it. But the question anybody had was, who would she choose? Well, that's a good question, because One of the things that Rescue Rangers did throughout its run is they kind of teased the fact that Chip and Dale, and even Gadget herself, could end up with characters outside of the group. In the earlier episodes, basically some of the ones that premiered on the Disney Channel and served as the first episodes in syndication after the premiere, Chip was being teased as ending up with a character named Tammy the Squirrel, who was a young, late teen daughter, basically a late teenage squirrel who developed a crush on Chip after he saved her from falling. He caught her, saved her, and he became her shining knight. So they were teasing that possibility. They were teasing that. With Gadget, they introduced a character named Sparky the Lab Rat, who, unbeknownst to Gadget and the Rangers, was the lab rat of Professor Nimnol. So, yeah, she was falling for him, or they were teasing it. Then you have Dale. Dale, it was towards the end of the series, ironically, as Chip's was at the beginning, Dale's was like towards the end. He was being teased going with a character named Foxglove Bat. And believe it or not, they actually continued this tease and even kind of hinted at the fact that Dale and Foxglove could be more than just, good friends, very good friends, with the Boom Studios revival, 8-issue revival of the Rescue Rangers in comic book form. It was about several years ago. But even still, that was just a few years ago. This was back around the 90s, the early 90s. And at that time, Foxglove was just a one-off character. So her possibly being with Dale and them actually, believe it or not, teasing it a little bit at the end of Good Times, Bad Times, which I think was like episode 62 or something, 63. I thought was pretty good on their part to leave that open to interpretation. But still, the question was always asked, who was going to end up with who? Who is Gadget going to choose? Because like I said, at the time, Foxglove and Tammy and Sparky were looked at as one-off characters. They had no idea that those characters would go on to be fan favorites, especially Foxglove. So the question remains, who would have Gadget chosen? Now, a lot of fans assume, even to this day, that the obvious choice would have been Chip. He's the leader, he's kind of the heroic one, he's the obvious choice. And you'd be right. Disney has a tradition of doing that somewhat, right? Well, in this case, though, with Rescue Rangers, it was kind of like you didn't know. And it seemed to me that yes, Chip and Gadget would have been the obvious choice. And there's a lot of fans that have gone with that. You don't believe me? Check out some of the well-renowned webcomics and fan fiction stories like Of Mice and Mayhem, Death of a Comedian, and so forth. But even with that said, it seemed that throughout the series, the creative staff favored Dale and Gadget more so than Chip and Gadget. So it seemed to me, in my speculation, in my theory and speculation, that had the movie became a reality and maybe quite possibly served as the finale for the series, that I think they would have gone through with it and put Dale with Gadget. Gadget would have chose Dale, and they would have ended up together. And again, Disney is known to do the obvious, the hero, the leader, whatever, getting the girl. But they're also known, believe it or not, for doing the unexpected. And I can tell you from experience that is true, because there's a series you might have heard of it, called Gargoyles, And when Goliath returned to his clan after he and Elisa and his daughter, who we got introduced to, Angela, and the pet gargoyle dog Broadway went on this journey through time and space and whatever. Basically, Angela was introduced to, like I said, the rest of Goliath clan. Basically, Broadway, Lexington, and Brooklyn. Now, the way they positioned Brooklyn was he was looked at as basically the kind of guy that would not only be the second in command, the next in line to take the mantle when Goliath would step down, but he was also positioned as the guy that would get the girls, as the hero that would win the heart of, the opposite. Basically, he'd be the hero that would win the day and win the girl. That's what I'm trying to say. However, what Disney did, though, despite teasing this a few times at Brooklyn, they actually went in the opposite direction. They surprised us. Because what happened in the 3-part finale of the syndicated series, the original syndicated series, they teased a couple of times that there was something there between Broadway and Angela. But yet, it didn't look like Angela took notice. That is until the ending when Broadway told her about the library and the castle in which they returned home to thanks to Xanatos, who turned good. Complicated, I know. Check out the series or Wikipedia it. You'll know what I'm talking about. But anyway, long story short, the Goliath Chronicles start off, and one of the first things we see in the first episode is Broadway and Angela kissing and embracing. And Brooklyn looking all sad. And something like saying along the lines of love is such sweet sorrow or something like that. It's kind of reciting something Shakespeare said. So Disney's no stranger in doing this, was what I'm getting at. And I wouldn't have put it past them to go either way, but I think the more favorable direction they would have gone with is Dale and Gadget. It was obvious. It showed it. I mean, throughout the series, they showed a lot of favoritism towards it. So I wouldn't have been surprised if they would have officially gone with it in the movie, whether the movie served as a finale or as a continuation of the series. I think they would have gone through with it. I really do. So with that said, the question is basically, who would have been the villain? Well, I think I have an idea. Now, with DuckTales, we had an all-new original villain in Murloc, so obviously that was going to be the direction they were going to go. But since this is a group, not, seen as though this is a team, if you will, you have to go with a character that is new, but also associates with some characters that are familiar. So I think whatever character they would have brought in would, of course, just like Murloc, would have been of the mythical kind, but would have been powerful enough to where not only would he recruit the villains that the Rangers have faced before, from Nimnol, Fat Cat, Rat Capone, maybe, you name it, or maybe just on his own. I think this villain would have been the kind of villain that even those associated with him, whether they were established villains or not, would want to see get vanquished. It would basically be like, nah, this guy's got to go. This guy's gone too far. So that's one possibility for the villain that they could go with. The other possibility is to have a villain team up. And yes, we do have villain team-ups lately in the current shows, including MLP FIM. But the point is, we're talking a villain team-up that no one would see coming. Like I mentioned, Capone, Nimno, Fat Cat, stuff like that. I mean, yeah, you could play on the fact that Nimno doesn't know why a cat or a rat or whatever recruited him over or invited him to come over. And again, that's where you can bring in the mythical villain, if you will, that has the magic to make them all understand each other. But you could have basically utilized the villain team up as a great finale for the series, because these are villains that have all been wronged in their minds by the Rescue Rangers. So, villain-wise, you get someone mythical and powerful to recruit the villains, maybe use some kind of magic or power to make them understand each other and make them obedient. Or you just get the established villains all together and they come up with an idea to finally just team up and basically take out the Rangers for good. Other things as well as I think that should be explored, or would have been explored if the movie would have happened, is I think we would have found out, and possibly could have found out, more about Gadget's background, and mostly about her dad and his ties with Monterey. We could have found out more about why Chip and Dale would always fight over a girl. Maybe, I don't know. We could have that traditional Disney story of here's the ups, here's the down, here's the reconciliation, and in this case, here's the final battle, here's the climax, stuff like that. And just with some of the things I just mentioned, I think it would have really worked. But that all depends on if that would have been the direction they'd gone in. Overall, though, when one thinks about it, these are just speculations and theories on my part of what I think of what I believe the Rescue Ranger movie would have been like had it gotten the chance to be released in theaters like Disney planned to do on the Disney Movie Tune division back around 91, 92. I think, obviously, my belief in speculation and theory is that everything I've talked about could have been obvious ways they were probably going to go, I should say, with the series or with the movie. And I think, obviously, speculation part of me, theory part of myself, believes that instead of a continuation, it would have been used as a finale for the series. So, that's just my speculation. That's my theory. I mean, it's been 30 years, 30-year anniversary, part of it, if you will, if you look at it that way, of Rescue Rangers debuting. But I leave the question to you guys. What do you think? What do you think would have happened? Do you agree with any of the scenarios and speculations that I just came up with? What are your thoughts? How do you think the movie would have been utilized? How do you think the movie would have been showcased? Do you think it would have served as a finale, a continuation? Who do you think they would have finally had Gadget go with? How do you think the villains would be involved? Do you think them revealing themselves to the public would have been a good way to help wrap things up? What do you think? Let me know down below. Comment if you like, and I'm out.